Wala pa, di man matubag. Guys, mag-safety video may. Pictura na to ni karon ng kon. Pictura na to ni karon ng mga tulog ani safety video ba. KitKat. Nah, kaubo na karon din na ako na tagag card. Kaubo kay mo buanga mo. Kala niya.
KitKat niya kinuha.
Kala niya. Kala niya bibigyan ko siya ng telephone card. Ganti-ganti lang. Kamay na lang.
Keeping things nice and tidy. Obviously a problem for some. And that careless attitude could lead to problems for others.
Gunting. Ligas. Ligas. Vacuum yan. Slip nga. Nadulas.
Slips, trips and falls are one of the most common causes of accidents on board.
Ba't ka tumungtong ganyan?
Most ships have rules concerning work clothing being worn in the accommodation.
Oy, si ano?
Footwear in particular.
Silong yun ah.
In this case, just something for somebody else to trip over.
Silong Mia.
Other causes of trips include high door sills, loose or damaged flooring, and trailing cables. Every ship needs speed. There are schedules to keep, the next cargo waiting. But in the accommodation, speed can be dangerous. Running along decks, passageways, up and down stairways will eventually end in trouble. Handrails should always be used, particularly in bad weather. When people get busy, it's easy to forget things, such as what might happen when the proper equipment isn't used. The dangers of blocking exits and walkways, particularly in an emergency, when people need to exit quickly. Fires on board ship can be devastating, and every ship will have clear procedures. Further information on personal safety in the accommodation can be found in the accompanying workbook.
Binito.
10 minutes na.
Another video na naman. Manonood tayo.
Daming bala mo.
Balik-balik mo lang.
Ito upo dito.
Oh, ayan, okay oh. Dito yan oh. Southampton. Dito yan oh, dyan tayo oh.
Transportation system using purpose-built vessels connected to the shore by ramps, allowing wheeled cargoes to be driven directly on and off the ship.
Oh, grande yan oh.
When it comes to handling cargo, few other sectors in shipping can match Ro-Ro for efficiency and fast turnarounds. But speed relies on a high level of organisation, and in particular, a considerable emphasis on health and safety, as even a minor incident can bring the entire system to a halt. This program and accompanying workbook look Railroad's origins date back to the 1850s, when ferries were first built to carry trains across rivers that were too wide for bridges. The more familiar vehicle-carrying concept grew rapidly after World War II, as former tank landing craft began to be adapted for commercial use. The 1950s and 60s saw new purpose-built vessels introduced on short sea routes around the waters of Europe, North America and Japan. And by the 1970s and 80s, large deep-sea ro-ro vessels were entering service that could lower a ramp anywhere in the world where there was a suitable berth. Replacing the need for traditional cargo handling facilities, ro-ro revolutionized the job of the labor force, both ashore and aboard ship, offering unique speed and handling everything that was self-propelled or capable of being lashed on a trailer. Today, ro-ro has continued to develop into some distinct sectors. These include specialist vehicle carriers built to transport bulk shipments of both used and new export cars and trucks, and Ropax ferries, fitted with passenger accommodation for the accompanying drivers of trucks and cars. There's also stow-ro, where roll trailers, translifters and cassettes are used to stow break bulk cargoes such as paper or forestry products. And finally, there are conros. These large, multi-purpose ro-ro vessels have a design flexible enough that any combination of containers, export vehicles, trailers, plant and palletized cargoes can be carried on a single ship. Each type of cargo presents different challenges for drivers, stevedores and ship's personnel. And as vehicle decks are a shared workspace with a high exposure to cargo movement, it requires everyone to be fully aware of the risks to safety. Working in close proximity to large trucks or heavy plant, often in narrow or confined spaces, is clearly hazardous. At times, the speed of ro-ro operations can be an added danger. If you are not constantly vigilant, you run the risk of being crushed or struck by moving vehicles and cargo, even if you are not involved directly in stowing and securing. To minimize the risks, there are some basic principles you should apply. Firstly, be seen. As well as head protection and safety footwear, all personnel working on vehicle decks must wear high visibility outer clothing with reflective stripes. The reflective stripes help to make you more visible to drivers. But the ship's decks should also be adequately lit to ensure good visibility. Clean, high-vis clothing is a standard requirement across the ro-ro industry. But depending on the design and operation of the vessel, you may also need additional personal protective equipment. For example, aboard some ro-ros, noise levels can be excessively high during cargo operations. Ear protection may be necessary, but remember, it can also mask the sound of maneuvering vehicles. The second, vitally important principle is to be aware of your surroundings. always watch out for vehicles manoeuvring. Some are fitted with automatic reversing signals, and drivers may also use horns as an indication of their presence or intention to manoeuvre. But at times, a ro-ro deck during cargo operations can be an especially noisy environment. You may hear nothing at all of a moving vehicle until it is too late. So always check to see what is happening behind you as well as ahead of you. And just because you see a vehicle coming towards you, it doesn't mean its driver can see you, as many drivers, particularly when reversing, will have a restricted view. To avoid being crushed in a confined space, never stand between vehicles that are moving into position and obstructions, such as a bulkhead. You could be in danger here and here.
Ayan na.
Likewise, never stand between a reversing vehicle and a stationary vehicle.
Ipit nga.
Always stand to the side of moving cargo with a clear means of escape. If not obstructed by lashings, the space between the front and rear of two stowed vehicles can also provide refuge. Finally, remember this. Never cross into the path of moving vehicles. On steel decks, large trucks and heavy plant cannot stop in a split second.
Yeah, ayun. Slide. Mabisat no, di masyado mabisat.
Ro-ros are complex vessels with a design radically different from other ships. On arrival in port, a ro-ro must be reconfigured from its seagoing state into one which can begin working cargo. Once alongside, the first stage of this process is usually the lowering of the main external access ramps. The design and size of these ramps varies. Some of the very largest can be more than 40 meters in length when unfolded, and are a major hazard if operated incorrectly. As their reliability is essential to the vessel's operations and seaworthiness, ramps should never be lowered without first checking that the area is clear of obstructions that could cause damage.
Okay, normal dia.
Before cargo operations begin, and at times throughout the discharge and loading cycle, the crew will also be required to open doors and hatches, position hoistable decks, and raise and lower internal ramps and ramp covers, so as to provide access for vehicular traffic within the vessel. These should only ever be operated by trained, designated ship's personnel, working in accordance with the vessel's safety procedures. Adjacent areas must be clear of people and obstructions before they are moved. Just before movement commences, visual and audible alarms will sound. Constant safe level of air quality within the vehicle decks. Exhaust gases from vehicles can contain several harmful substances. These include carbon monoxide from petrol engines and nitric oxide and nitrogen dioxide from diesel engines. People and moving vehicles. The fewer people having access to the cargo decks, the less likelihood there is of accidents occurring. Ideally, pedestrians not involved in cargo operations should use dedicated gangways and walkways to access the ship. cargo ramps should only be used as a last resort, when no other means of access is available, and be designed to provide physical separation between vehicles and pedestrians. With RoPax vessels and ferries, passenger movement should be controlled, so they spend only the time it takes to park a car on the vehicle deck. Once aboard, people and traffic must continue to be segregated via designated routes. These should be permanently marked and always remaining free from obstruction, including stowed cargo or discarded lashings that would cause a trip hazard. No-go areas and exits must also be well lit and clearly signposted. To ensure the safe passage of vehicles, a traffic flow system Many of the vehicles driven aboard ro-ro vessels are of such design that the view from the driving position, particularly when reversing, is severely limited. At times, even cars may need assistance when backing into tight spaces. If the vision of a driver is obscure, it will require a trained person, known as a banksman or marshal, to guide the vehicle either by radio or more commonly by hand signals. And sometimes high-pitched whistles are used as a signal to instruct drivers to stop. Banksmen or marshals will often be members of the stevedoring team. But ship's personnel may also fulfill the role, particularly if they are responsible for stowing and securing. Marshalling puts people in close proximity to moving vehicles and plant. So it's vital to remember the basic principles of remaining visible and staying alert to the risks of being run over or trapped by a moving vehicle. These include semi-trailers, roll trailers, and translifters. Tugmasters are far more manoeuvrable than conventional tractor units and have a much smaller turning circle. They can either be left-hand drive or right-hand drive. Most have a rotating driving position and logic steering, enabling a driver to face the direction of travel when reversing. Fitted across all designs is a hydraulically operated fifth-wheel coupling, which can be used to raise and lower trailers. With semi-trailers, this helps prevent grounding or damage when negotiating ramps and inclines, and allows them to be placed on a trestle horse for securing aboard ship. One design feature that needs particular consideration is the driver's cab, which is usually offset to one side. This must be taken into account when marshalling, as it will not always be possible to maintain a safe line of sight when positioning in confined areas. To carry out the maneuver safely, 2 marshals will be required. The rear marshal must stand in a safe position to one side of the rear of the reversing trailer. As the driver will now not be able to see the rear marshal, the second marshal is employed to act as the driver's eyes, while staying in the line of sight of the rear marshal to relay any hand signals they may give. It's worth remembering
Pagkatapos na yung video, ano namin, film showing on board. Dito kami lahat. Yan, walang nakatulog. Ako muntik na.
Volevo fare questi cani subito l'iniziativo. Volevo fare la fotografia, che ha fatto?
Allora, vai Gasos. Vai,
Picture taking, picture taking.
Picture
Picture taking.
Okay.
Picture taking.
Mai che mi fa.
1, 2, 3.
Yes! Yeah!
Vai, vai.
Oh, tomats, tomats!
One more, one more, one more, one more.
Oh, tomats!
One more, one more.
Picture taking, picture taking.
Non sabia da per te.
E appena seleziono picture.
Okay.
Hey! Finito, finito!
Vabbè, che peso 85
Walang nakatulog guys, walang nakatulog. Walang nakatulog. Walang nakatulog, so walang nabidyohan na natutulog. Muntikan ako, gano'n na ako eh. Muntikan na. So guys, thanks for watching. God bless us all.
Kain ka lang kayo tulad.
Talents, love you.
Tagay na yung mas si Butik.
God bless you.